Talal Ahmad here. Late night parking lot, Washington University Danforth Center. I'm here with author, columnist. A lot of people don't know this is the STL Stranger from the Evening Whirls intellectual Umar Lee. About to discuss with the AOC STL250, St. Louis' celebration of its 250th year as a city. What that means, how that relates to the broader metropolitan St. Louis area, how that relates, how the broader metropolitan area relates, what that means to the different communities, different demographics in the broader metropolitan area. Umar Lee, what's up, bro?
What's happening, man?
Chilling, man. Just doing my thing. So, STL250. What does that mean exactly?
I mean, it means a lot. It's a significant milestone. 250 years. The community is excited about it, having events all over town, Missouri History Museum, WashU, etc. So I'm not going to take from that it's a significant event, or that I'm also not excited about it and recognize the Shoto brothers and Pierre Leclerc and de Giverville and Delos and Cabanne and these other early French founders and the early part of the city. So that's definitely something I've studied and researched and I find interest in as I am a St. Louisan. Providence put me in St. Louis. Providence put you in St. Louis, and this is what we were born into. My whole counter perspective would be that while St. Louis is 250, and we should recognize that, and we have some great institutions here, at the same time, the St. Louis story is bigger than the story that's being portrayed in these events by these speakers. We have an alternate history. We have a proletarian history of St. Louis 250 years. A history of the Native American people who were here before the European settlers, before the French and the Spanish and the Americans were laying claims to this area. A great history of the Osage people here in the St. Louis area in Mound City. I believe there's an arch downtown, which I don't think the arch had ever been built downtown because you had to tear down 40 square blocks of historic buildings to do so. But if we do have an arch downtown, I don't see how we don't have a monument to the genocide of Native Americans, in which St. Louis played a crucial role, being that Lewis and Clark came out of here. The history of St. Louis, we are taught in schools in St. Louis that slavery and Jim Crow and segregation is something that happened down south. When, of course, St. Louis was a slave state city, Missouri was a slave state, and this was a Jim Crow city and a Jim Crow state. This city largely built by slave labor. Many historic buildings here built by slave labor. Slave labor is an integral part of the history of St. Louis, and 100 years of Jim Crow and then quasi-Jim Crow afterwards is a significant part of St. Louis. So you cannot have a discussion of St. Louis history without dedicating a large portion of that time to African Americans in St. Louis, being that African Americans are more than 50% of the population of the city of St. Louis, and an increasingly large percentage of the population in St. Louis County. Of the working class, of the general strike of the 19th century, of how the Veiled Prophet Society was founded, of the history of trade unionism in St. Louis, of some of our great activists, the St. Louis Commune, etc. The working class history in St. Louis runs deep. And this is of all races, of Native Americans, of African Americans, of white Americans, of the European immigrant groups that came here to St. Louis, your Irish, your Italians, other groups of people, of the people that came up here from the Boot Heel and the Ozarks and Arkansas and Mississippi during the Great Depression in the early 20th century, many of them who walked up to St. Louis or hitchhiked up to St. Louis. I'm more interested in the story of the men who with hammers built these buildings, who with shovels dug the ground. Those are the people's history that interest me. I'm less interested in the moguls and the wealthy and the big names. I want to hear working class proletarian history, because without them nothing ever happens. And history is seldom...
No Eads Bridge. No Wainwright Building.
Exactly.
No Union Station.
Absolutely. None of that. None of that. None of the buildings at Forest Park, nothing. You know what I'm trying to say? So I want to hear history from that perspective. I just don't want to hear about the Shoto brothers and the Cleed and other figures in the history of St. Louis, Senator Blair and Mayor Cervantes later on. Yeah, I've researched all of them. I've studied all of them. That's legitimate history. I won't take that. I've done the Calvary Cemetery tour and the Bell Fountain Cemetery tour. Very interesting places. Very interesting history of mayors and businessmen and tycoon, Anheuser-Busch and Limp and all. That's all very fascinating history. But it's not the only history of St. Louis. Anheuser-Busch Brewery was built and maintained, and the beer was produced by working people. Limp, same thing. Every factory in St. Louis, the same thing. Every building in St. Louis, the same thing. So we need to...
The great textile industries, the great shoe factories.
That's right, the garment industry, everything that we had in St. Louis. So when you go up North Broadway and Hall Street and Riverview and the enormous industrial sector of St. Louis, you had your moguls, and then you had, for every one of them, you had 500 to 1,000 workers. So this is the history of St. Louis, of a city where Native Americans lived, of African Americans, of immigrant groups that came over here, and a continuous history. The Bosnians now coming, the Somalis, the Africans, the Afghanis, the Iraqis, the other immigrant groups that are coming here to St. Louis. The Palestinians would play a prominent role in the city of St. Louis. The Lebanese-Syrian faction, which Mayor Slade is a part of. So St. Louis is much bigger than the simple narrative you hear by elites. You said today they were sipping tea and crumpets, eating crumpets.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, at the that's not how many people in St. Louis sip tea?
It's just what they always have been doing.
Right. How many people in St. Louis do it? That's it's an inaccessible environment where your average working class St. Louisan would come into that environment and not feel welcomed. They would feel that, and then they would get the vibes from people, and the way they're discussing history is not relevant to them. And the tea and crumpets is not relevant to them.
There was a very elaborate, plush celebration at the Missouri History Museum today. I don't know what the demographics of the patrons will be like tomorrow, but there were several hundred people there. Outside of the people who were changing trash liners and dusting things and sweeping the floor, there were no African Americans outside of those people and me as a journalist there documenting it.
And that's really indefensible in a city that's a majority African American, in the metropolitan area with several 100,000 African Americans. I don't see how that's justifiable. That just shows you, when you talk about activism circles, and this is across the country, but we're going to focus on St. Louis right now. Activism circles, urbanist circles, etc. It's lily white, private school, mostly West County reared or the equivalent of West County where they came from, and it's an upper class perspective, and it's an upper class conversation. And if you don't have an upper class upbringing, an upper class conversation, upper class mannerism, and
you ain't
demeanor,
talking about nothing.
You ain't talking about nothing. You ain't gonna get in the conversation. They don't even want you in the conversation. They don't even want you there. That's the reality. Most of these types of settings are very classist in nature.
I want to make a segue right there, because even to myself, it does. I can see how it seems like, I, no matter who I'm talking to or what I'm talking about, it can almost kind of seem like I am obsessed with race matters. And my defense to that would be that we live in a very we live in a society that has an abundance of race issues. But I would like to really get your perspective. You've been a historian and somewhat of an expert on demographics. Is it all about race, or is it class? Is there a distinguishment between class and race? What?
I think globally, no matter where you go, it's always about class. And in America, it's also about race. So everything in America is about race and class. Sometimes it's both together, sometimes it's one by itself. Because there's someone on the left that will say, no, it's all class. No. It's race and it's class.
I see. Washington University in St. Louis, STL250. No matter where you go throughout the celebration, not just here on the campus here at Washington University, but anywhere where there is a significant partaking in the celebration, STL250 is damn near synonymous with Washington University. Mm-hmm. So there is no denying that it is a thing that Washington University, for whatever reasons, is playing a very significant part, at least in the celebration and the acknowledgement of STL250. What is Washington University's place in STL250? What is Washington University's place in the city?
We're here at Washington University, which is a great academic institution. It gives it benefits the St. Louis community, mostly through the students coming here to live and spend time, and the faculty, BJC, WashU Medical Center, etc. So WashU does benefit the community. However, as you see how WashU's been built, if you go around the country to a lot of other campuses, you'll see those campuses, most of them tend to be a little more opened up, a little more integrated in the city. What I see here is an isolated ghetto, very isolated from the community. And when I talk to these students, they've graduated, they've been here 4 or 5 years, they know absolutely nothing about the city of St. Louis. Nothing. They don't get around. They're told at WashU to don't go north. They end up not knowing anything about the city of St. Louis. They don't even go to the south side. The ones that do, they take it upon themselves. And it's a small minority. So we have an isolated student body. We have isolated academia. For example, you look at UMSL, a lot of their professors are involved in different community efforts. We see WashU at a much lower level. They're just not involved in community efforts like you see in a lot of other cities. They just seem to have no interest in the city of St. Louis, no interest in the fate of the city. This is an isolated intellectual slum, intellectual ghetto.
Umar, which makes it even more paradoxical. So the point that you just made, and you're not the first person that I've talked to about STL250 and Washington University's place in that aspect. So on one hand, Washington University is playing a very significant role in the celebration of STL250, yet that is a thing. What you were just talking about. How can it be that it's such an isolated institution within this metro area, yet it is so influential and it has so much to say when it comes to St. Louis and St. Louis's
Right.
250th.
They have so much to say about St. Louis, but they are not involved in St. Louis. They're just outside observers. If they really wanted to be involved in St. Louis community, these events they hold, these lecture series they hold here, these speakers they continuously bring in, these forums, these debates, etc., they would advertise and open up to the whole community, right? In many other cities I've lived in, they do the same thing. You know, they see themselves as part of the community. They invite the community. They advertise the community when they have events. WashU, it's a closed club. You might be able to get in if you find out when it is, but they don't make it accessible to the community. They have a lot to say about St. Louis, but they're not that involved in St. Louis. They don't look like St. Louis. They don't act like St. Louis. And they're geographically, architecturally constructed to insulate themselves from St. Louis. And in fact, I've been...
Speaking of which, excuse me for interrupting you, but I bet that at that celebration, at least today, I bet that there were more people from Yale in the Missouri History Museum today than there were St. Louisans.
I could very well believe that. Well, this is what you'll find in a lot of these forums. You'll find a healthy percentage, maybe even the majority of transplants, and the rest of people being West County reared people who are now in the city, trying to call shots. And they only see the world from the perspective of their social class, and anyone coming from outside of the social class they're really not interested in listening to.
I see. Umar, I know, first of all, I want to say, I know that this means different things to different people, different sides of town.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, how does St. Louis feel about Washington University? And then what does that mean to different communities?
I think most St. Louisans, black and white, south side, north side, South County, North County, other places throughout the metropolitan area, just look at WashU as a fancy, expensive, prestigious school that their children will never be able to go to, that is in St. Louis, but they have no interaction with it whatsoever, and have probably never set foot on the campus.
I see. Community engagement, as far as from your perspective, historically, this is not the oldest academic institution in the city. I mean, St. Louis University is 50 years older than Washington University. But Washington University has been around for 160 years. Historically, what type of engagement, what type of contributions has this institution made to the metropolitan area? There is no denying that Washington University School of Medicine, Barnes Jewish Hospital saves a lot of lives here. We have one of the best emergency rooms arguably in the nation, and they save a lot of lives. Cutting edge research, innovative scientists. Outside of that, what kind of significant contributions, whether punitive or productive contributions, can Washington University say they've made for this city?
I think WashU, the medical thing obviously is one thing. WashU Medical Center. I think another thing is just if you go to the Loop, a lot of the shoppers and a lot of the businesses are supported by students, and the Loop is definitely, I think, one of the best social scenes in the metropolitan area. One of the few places where races mix. some of these neighborhoods around here, you know, faculty live in, and they open up businesses, etc. And they make the neighborhood healthier. I think that maybe some of the things is getting the culture and the fine arts in St. Louis, or even independent film, which I'm a big fan of, as a documentarian. I think that WashU contributes to that. Maybe not financially, but just by being here, and a lot of people that are affiliated with universities supporting these kind of artistic endeavors. So WashU definitely contributes
to the culture scene.
To the culture scene, yeah.
I see. Laying off WashU a little bit. STL250. No doubt about it. You are a diehard St. Louisan. You taught me a lot about St. Louis, and I'm a native St. Louisan. Can we elaborate a little more on the significance of this milestone?
Well, it's significant. It's 250 years since the Europeans proclaimed this a city. Not the 250th anniversary of the city, because it was Mound City before then, but it's a significant milestone in 250 years of development. And I live in Old North St. Louis. My building built in 1907, and we have many 19th century buildings around here. Unfortunately, a lot of our historic architecture has been torn down and continues to be torn down. But we're an older city, as Michael Allen said today. We have some wrinkles, but it's a continual progress, as is the human story. The St. Louis story is a continuing process.
Why are we tearing down our national historic treasures?
Well,
this architecture made out of these raw materials that it would be all but impossible to duplicate. What is it about us in St. Louis, and why are we doing this?
America is a historical country. The Europeans ran from their history in Europe to make a new start in America, and in America they can continuously run. St. Louis City, North County, St. Charles, Lincoln County, South City, South County, Jefferson County. West End, Mid County, West County. It's a continuous flight, a disregard for history, a disregard for the roots and foundation of the city. It's not just architectural, it's cultural. And it's tied, obviously, to race, flight, and capitalistic development.
I see. Umar, is there anything else relevant to this milestone? Do you think needs to be said, or anything else you'd like to share?
We're going to see some alternative events pop up through this year. Maybe some religious and ethnic minority communities hold their own St. Louis 250 to commemorate their communities 250 years here. We might see some special events in the African American community. We might see
Brooklyn should have a lot to do with that. Brooklyn, Illinois.
Oh yeah, Brooklyn, Illinois, yeah. Kinloch, Meacham Park, etc. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see.
Umar Lee, thanks so much for coming out on this late night, early morning to chop it up with me.
After 2 a.m. it was you.
Right, exactly. Right. Hopefully we won't get profiled. Let me stop.
Yeah.
STL Stranger, one love.